Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. We are doing something really fascinating today. We're going to take an ancient, legendary battlefield and transform it into a profoundly modern psychological exploration. We'll be looking at the very first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, but we aren't just looking at it as a piece of history. We're treating it as a deep dive into the human mind during a moment of absolute, complete crisis. So if you've ever felt entirely paralyzed by an impossible choice, well, this explainer is absolutely going to resonate with you. How can I kill those I love? With that one single dramatic statement from Arjuna, we can totally bypass any kind of dry academic introduction and drop right into the highest emotional stakes imaginable. This is the starting point of our journey today. We have this legendary warrior, a guy renowned for his unmatched focus and sheer strength, experiencing a complete and total moral collapse right as the biggest battle of his entire life is about to kick off. Now, to demystify this ancient crisis, today's insights are drawn directly from some incredibly powerful foundational texts. We're looking at the message of the Gita, featuring the luminous interpretation by Sri Aurobindo, alongside some highly detailed analyses from the Learn Gita documentary summaries and traditional accounts. By anchoring our explainer right here in these curated sources, we can clearly map out the exact sequence of Arjuna's breakdown. And more importantly, we can figure out what it actually means for anyone facing a major crisis of duty. Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, a cosmic standoff. To truly understand the microscopic internal collapse we're going to be examining, we first have to appreciate the massive macro scale of this impending war. The stage is set at Kurukshetra. It's an ancient, sacred land where two colossal forces have basically drawn a line in the sand. On one side, we have the Pandavas, standing as the warriors of righteousness, and on the opposing side are the Kauravas, who our sources identify as the unjust rulers of Hastinapura. Now, great efforts were absolutely made to prevent this war, because, as the texts point out, no conflict truly benefits anyone, right? But every single attempt at peace failed. War became inevitable. And so these two mighty armies assembled face to face, setting up this historical and moral stage where the tension is just palpable.
Part 2. Sounding the conch shells. The roar of war.
That initial heavy tension is suddenly shattered. The texts describe a deafening, incredibly aggressive start to the war, signaled by the blowing of ancient war horns. Grandsire Bhishma blows his conch, followed by these thunderous sounds of other war instruments echoing across the earth and sky. It completely electrified the atmosphere. It is the ultimate point of no return. And the primary instrument cutting through all this tension is the shank, or the conch shell. It's a sacred natural wonder from the ocean's depths that actually resonates with the cosmic sound of Om. Our sources note that when Lord Krishna, acting as Arjuna's charioteer, blew his specific conch shell, the Panchajanya, the sound was so penetrating, so powerful, that the entire cosmos trembled. Actually, before we get back to the battlefield, I want to take a really quick, fascinating tangent here based on an article by Sudhanshuji Maharaj. Because beyond their use as ancient war horns or spiritual symbols, blowing a conch shell actually has some mind-blowing physical and mental health benefits. It acts as a deep breathing exercise, kind of like yoga. It requires keeping the spine erect, which obviously improves your posture. Plus, it's a heavy workout for the diaphragm, the lungs, and the chest, which boosts respiratory function. Culturally, it's even said to fill the mind with optimism, willpower, and positive vibrations. I mean, it's just amazing how an ancient ritual connects so directly to modern well-being. Part 3. Arjuna's physical collapse, the warrior's panic attack. So, despite all that optimism and willpower supposedly generated by the conchs, our narrative takes a really sharp, unexpected pivot. We move away from that roaring macro-level battlefield right into the intensely personal, microscopic physical collapse of Arjuna, literally the greatest archer of his time. According to the source texts, Arjuna asks Krishna to drive their chariot right between the two armies. He wants to see exactly who has joined forces against them. But as he surveys the battlefield, he doesn't just see anonymous enemy combatants. He sees grandfathers, he sees revered teachers, cousins, and lifelong friends. He sees the people he loves. And this realization triggers what the text describes as an invasion of supreme compassion, a total, overwhelming emotional takeover.
What happens next is astonishingly modern in its description. Arjuna starts experiencing these profound physical symptoms of grief. His limbs give way, his mouth becomes parched and dry, he experiences uncontrollable shivering and trembling, his hair stands on end, and he describes his skin as literally burning all over. I'm reading through these rapidly because honestly, this is exactly what a rising panic attack looks and feels like. It just shows how deeply relatable this ancient text is to anyone who has ever experienced severe, debilitating anxiety.
And then comes the ultimate physical manifestation of his breakdown, the legendary Gandiva bow. A divine weapon that completely symbolizes his warrior identity and his mission, literally slips from his grasp. His mind is just reeling, his thoughts are whirling, and he physically cannot hold himself steady. The symbolic weight of this moment, it really cannot be overstated. The ultimate warrior has dropped his weapon without a single arrow being fired. This brilliantly illustrates the incredible paradox of his situation. The learned Gita source pulls in this beautiful metaphor from Sant Gyaneshwar to illustrate it. He says, just as a black bee can bore through dry, tough wood, yet gets trapped in a tender flower bud, it perfectly explains how Arjuna, this hardened warrior who had literally conquered demons and fought gods, is suddenly rendered completely trapped and helpless by the delicate, tender emotion of compassion. Part 4. The moral dilemma, Dharma versus emotion. This physical collapse guides us straight into the psychological core of the text. Arjuna's mind starts spinning with bad omens. He tells Krishna that everything just appears unfavorable. His vision is so clouded by inner chaos that he loses sight of any spiritual welfare or shreyas that could possibly come from fighting this war. He has hit a total moral standstill. He then reaches a pivotal realization, asking, what is the use of kingdom or luxuries or even life itself if they are gained by destroying those we love? He's actively questioning and dismantling the very goals and material pleasures that this entire massive war was meant to achieve in the first place. Think about it. If the people he wants to share the victory with are dead, the victory is utterly hollow. The depth of Arjuna's refusal here is absolute. Based on the Learn Gita documentary evidence, Arjuna states he wouldn't fight his kin even for sovereignty over the three worlds, heaven, earth, and the underworld, let alone a mere earthly kingdom. He acknowledges that the Kauravas are aggressors who have committed grave crimes, yes, yet he argues that killing them will still result in sin and moral taint. His conscience simply will not allow it. Part 5. Duty versus compassion, the Dharma Sankappa. The absolutely crucial point here is that this breakdown is not rooted in cowardice. It's not a fear of dying. The sources explicitly define this as a dharma sankata, a severe crisis of righteous action. Arjuna is trapped in a space where two separate, undeniable rights are violently colliding with one another. Here we see the impossible architecture of his conflict. On one side, you have his warrior dharma, his societal and ethical duty to uphold justice, fight against unjust rulers, and protect the innocent. On the other side is his emotional dharma, his deep-seated love, care, and loyalty to his family and his revered elders. When these two sides violently clash, it creates an ethical paralysis that is completely 100% understandable. I mean, how do you fulfill your duty when it destroys the people you love? Part 6. The power of surrender, the yoga of dejection. Let's move to our resolution and see how this builds into something truly transformative. Because the texts don't actually view Arjuna's breakdown as a failure. In fact, the very title of this first chapter is Arjuna Vasada Yoga, the yoga of dejection. It reframes his apparent weakness and moral standstill not as an ending, but as a deeply necessary prerequisite for a spiritual awakening. Arjuna undergoes a very specific psychological journey here. Step 1. He arrives as the confident, proud warrior. Step 2. His identity begins to dissolve when he is overwhelmed by compassion and the reality of the relationships on the battlefield. Step 3. He enters a state of honest confusion, where all his previous motivations, victory, kingdom, glory, feel entirely empty. And finally, Step 4. Complete surrender, where his ego fully dissolves. This leads to what is arguably one of the most powerful moments in the text. Arjuna drops down in his chariot and says to Krishna, I do not know what is right anymore. My heart is confused. I am your disciple now. Please guide me. The brilliant insight here is that the immense divine wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita does not begin with an immediate call to action or some big battle cry. It begins precisely with this vulnerable, powerful moment of admitting total confusion and surrendering the ego. Which brings us to a final question I want to leave you with today. We've explored how a legendary warrior completely lost his bearing when his duties tore him in opposite directions. But this isn't just ancient history, is it? When duty and compassion inevitably collide in your own life, when doing what is right deeply hurts someone you love, how do you choose? I really hope this explainer gave you a new framework for thinking about those impossible moments. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep questioning.